guys, welcome back to Clockwise Dandy Doodles. We have another breakdown for Requiem of the Rose King, episode 8. Normally in most animes I would tell you we're approaching the end, but we're not with Requiem. If you were not aware, there are 24 episodes. It may continue on the channel. I need to decide if I'm going to bring it across to the next half. It does slightly marginally better than most of the other videos that is playing in its favour right now. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you know if that video gets continued or not. So make sure you are subscribed because that really supports the channel, really helps me. Aim of the channel right now is to hit 1k. Whether we can hit 1k by the end of the year or not, I would love it. That would be amazing, but we're going to see where we end up. There's also a Discord channel too that allows you to get a notification to your phone. Recently, you would have noticed my midway review has gone up on a channel. In that video, I break down my top 3 OPs, EDs, and my current standing of anime. Really can't wait to see what you guys think about my thoughts and whether you agree, whether you slightly marginally disagree perhaps. Finally got that video up for you guys and I'm sorry it took a bit of a time. We are back on track now, back on schedule. So let's break down episode 8 because episode 8 was slightly different pace. Last week was very all over the place. It was very fast paced. We take a bit of a step back off the gas to focus again on Henry and Richard. But we do open quite quickly on a Dutch angle. This is a Dutch angle to set a contrast to the scenes of absolute happiness at the coronation meal. The blackbird pie we see is actually real. It is referenced in a Tudor cooking book. Some of the foods that were cooked at the palace for King Henry. Pie essentially was cooked, had a space in it. The birds are put in later. So as you cut open the pie, the birds then fly out. The Dutch angle simply shows us a contrast to the joyous scenes that we're seeing. Henry is simply uncomfortable and very unhappy. Henry is also feeling very trapped. He didn't really want to get back on the throne. He was put there and had no complete say in the matter. The person who feels perhaps the most alone at this party is Henry. Warwick this week named the Protector, therefore a regent is there to make all the decisions whilst the king is off on his pilgrimage. This is exactly what Warwick wanted. Warwick knew as well that Henry doesn't want the role. Easily aware that Henry isn't really interested in ruling. Henry doesn't really want to be a monarch or anything. Right now, Warwick has the best place possible on the throne. It's really up to him who he puts on the throne. We're not sure which prince is going to be planted on the throne just yet. It's a possibility that even Warwick might decide to keep it himself. I don't think he would, but it is something he could do if he really wanted to throw some spanners into the works and make this plot even more twisted. A Dutch angle is also used for Richard this week. Anne's marriage hits the English shores. Richard finds out. And naturally, this angle is to show the unease. Richard initially pretending that I'm fine, it's okay. But we know that's not quite fully true. Richard trying to be strong and hide the fact that it may not be fully truthful. We find out this week that Margaret is in France and the guys know about it. We do find out a bit of contrasting information a little bit later on as well. Right now, all they know is Margaret of House Lancaster is with France. The one thing going through Edward's head right now is, I don't want a war with France because that's expensive. He does state, we may have gained a few allies, but we are not in a good place. So right now, if Margaret makes a move from France, it's a game over. That's why we now see the next plan being put into action. Get George to come back. Loosen the grip that Warwick has, because right now, George is still a gambit. George also gets a very extreme Dutch angle. He is practically sideways when we come in and show him. George, of all people, is stuck in a very bad position. Last week I said, with Warwick now choosing Edward as a prince, it's a possibility that George is just going to get cast aside. George has no place. He's simply just there. He must be feeling very insecure. He must be absolutely troubled by the entire events. He is aware of how twisted everything is. If anything, George is the one person who has absolutely no control over their own situation. Dutch angle right now. He may as well have had this character completely upside down because George can't do anything. He has absolutely no choice but to go whatever Warwick says. Warwick last week we teased the idea was Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. 100% is. Right now Warwick is the one meddling, plotting, trying to work out which prince is going to go on the throne. We have no idea who's going on the throne. He could do anything. He could put either of them on the throne. Richard is sent off on the mission to try and convince George to come back. If George was to come back, Warwick again would lose that claim to the throne. They can probably convince the brother to come back. We are told that everyone is aware that Warwick has sided with the Lancasters. During Henry's pilgrimage, it takes a turn for a worse. Being alone with your thoughts can sometimes be the worst thing, and Henry's thoughts go to a very bad place. Henry feeling even more entrapped by the situation, knowing that the bloodshed that follows him, because he is a king, because people keep trying to put him on the throne, because people see him as a gambit and he's important, he's a pawn. People trying to gain that power over him. People keep dying. It seems to be a big burden upon his shoulders. This week we do see it really taking a toll on Henry, because Henry collapses during a party, whether it's just seeing the bird in the pie and perhaps a bird did die in a pie. Henry is a very sensitive soul. Health doesn't seem great, but at least this week we do get to see him crossing paths with the person he really wanted to see the most. Every time they seem happy, every time they get to have some time together, I definitely feel like I'm cheering for them. Margaret this week really taking a bit more of a Cersei Lannister. Perhaps this is actually who Cersei was based upon, because I told you Game of Thrones is based very loosely on Shakespeare's writings of the War of the Roses themselves. All of these people were taken as inspiration for the Game of Thrones. Margaret probably is Cersei Lannister, right down to the wearing of the red. And Margaret is, of course, Margaret of House Lancaster. Cersei Lannister is not too far away from Lancaster. She is the one pushing for the consummation of the marriage between her son and Anne. The consummation night ends up turning into a full-fledged argument between the two. Edward, still absolutely convinced Richard is a she, basically decides to upset poor Anne by letting her know that she's a woman. Therefore, your love is the one that is actually sinful. Bearing in mind the past is the past. The past is basically a terrible place. Edward is trying to get that one up, that I love Richard more than you, and your love is going to be bad, which is actually a woman. I knew this, you didn't know this. No sexy times end up happening that night. Everybody ends up going to bed sad and angry. You're not supposed to go to bed angry, guys. Richard in a bad place this week, stabbed in their run-in at the inn. Fever doesn't waste time on taking a few bashes at Richard, deciding that I'm going to pick on you, I'm going to make you feel like really low and trashy, and remind you that you should have died. Richard's own mind is against them. Generally, you are your own worst enemy. At this point, Richard is Richard's own worst enemy. But it is a very beautiful reuniting with Henry. I was cheering because I was wondering when they would meet again. Catesby hears some very interesting news. He hears that the king is actually walking around and not where they believe he is, in the tower. So House York is not aware that Henry is crowned and Henry is back out the tower. Nobody has really checked the tower in a while. As we said before, the tower is like house arrest. They leave you there, forget about you. If you're rich enough, they will treat you kindly. You'll have books, you'll be allowed to read and write and send letters, but you aren't allowed out. You're just basically allowed to walk around. It's a nice place, but it is pretty small. Warwick seemingly taking advantage of Edward and Anne's marriage, keeping the coronation thing a secret. To be fair, when we even saw it yet last week, it centered on the marriage of Edward and Anne, and then suddenly they hid in the coronation right underneath the end, and that's where it cut. I like the fact that it mimics what we as an audience saw. During our lake sequence, Henry is shown to be not bothered one bit by Richard's body, which is really nice. It's a true happy face, definitely from Richard, which we need to see more of it. I really just want these two to run away and there be no king. You know, screw it. Let Warwick rule. Let these guys run away and have a happy time. Sadly, we do end on a bit of a low note, and a very sad note, because it was something I was aware of, because it was alluded that Henry had been traumatized by women. Margaret had perhaps controlled him and made him do the deed against his own will, something he really doesn't seem comfortable with the idea of, and it's the reason why she's like, I don't love you or anything. It did seem that Henry was hurt by this, but also seemed scared of the idea of a woman, but it's not as simple as that. As a young child, Henry ended up seeing something that he really didn't need to see, and thus is traumatized by the idea of love, lust, betrayal. All of this stuff is haunting to him, something that he perhaps didn't understand as a young child. Very interesting parallel between both Richard and Henry. Both of them share a trauma of women, a trauma caused by the mother figure. Richard's mother wanted them to die. Henry's own mother really couldn't care less about Henry and was all about getting with another man. Henry has been left broken, and at this point, Henry doesn't see love as a good thing. Love is just lust. It's a bit more than a sin. Henry's words at this point start to really drive a nail into Richard's heart. This is the moment where Richard realizes, I'm in love with person. I'm in love with Henry. And the words right now, Henry telling them, love is horrible, I see you as an angel. Richard is hurt by hearing Henry's words, spurning the idea of love. It's a very different episode from last week. Thankfully, there's not too many names clashing. I did also realise that if it was going to be Edward of Lancaster on the throne, It's a battle of Edwards. It's literally Edward of York and Edward of Lancaster going head to head. Warwick this week doing the whole Littlefinger thing. You can see that Martin has taken influence of that character from him. The Edward of Lancaster could be Tyrion, maybe, and might be Sansa. It's just interesting because that was based on the War of the Roses, and seeing the characters in this anime, knowing these characters and seeing them reimagined in a different scenario, seeing them still going through the motions. Interesting retell at the most, and it may not be my favourite anime of this season, but the story is at least interesting enough to see where they're going to go with it. Spin on what happened, retell a story and what they can make with a story like this. So I hope you guys are having a good weekend. I hope you've really looked after yourselves. Make sure you are giving yourself the love that you need to get through the weekend or whatever it is. Be kind to yourself. Have a good day, guys. Bye bye.